Hi, I'm Steve Shanesy, and welcome back to the Popular Woodworking Shop and episode 3 of our 1944 Unisaw restoration project. Today we're going to work on the exterior of the saw, cleaning up those surfaces, making them look nice. So let's get started. I've already removed the base of the cabinet and the floor. I did that because in trying to clean these surfaces, which are very rough, you really can't get down in there. So I've decided to repaint the base, and because this has some rust on it, we're going to prime it at least too. Now, before I can paint the base, I had to clean it. So, good old scrub brush, and in this case, I'm using a solution of simple green. That'll cut the grease and will get rid of all the crud. I've already cleaned it, so now it's time to spray. To get some paint, I made a trip to the automotive store today. You know, at those stores, you have a lot more color options than you would at your local hardware or paint supplier. And the other good thing is that these paints are made to work with metal. And this, of course, is a gray primer that I'm going to first apply. So here's the bottom panel from the cabinet. You can see it's got some rust in here, and I want to get that cleaned up and spray it with primer. Now, the other side, as you'll see, I've already sanded. Looks ready to go now. So I just went over this with 120 grit sandpaper and a random orbit sander. Cleans it up quick as a whistle. So now that we got this side cleaned up, and I've wiped it down with a damp cloth just to pick up any dust on there, I'm going to go ahead and give it a coat of primer. So now let's go back to the base here. The primer's plenty dry, so let's put our top coat on. I hope this works out beautifully. I think it's a nice gray that'll work well with the original Delta color. So here we have the saw cabinet. Of course, the base has been removed, but it's turned on its side. You can see that I've already cleaned up this surface. It's not perfect, but it's the finish I want. Now, I have some more cleaning to do, and I want to tell you how I've gone about doing that. Let me explain the process here that we've used to clean up what you've already seen so far. I have in this little bucket a solution of nothing more than water with just a few drops of dish soap added. What that does is provide a lubricant so that when I sand using a wet dry sandpaper, in this case I'm using 400, the dirt and the crud and the paint, the little bit of paint I'll take off, doesn't get clogged in the grit. Wet sanding this metal is much like what you do if you were wet sanding a finish. If you haven't tried that yet, it can produce spectacular results. In this case, even though the finished paint will have a smoother feel than it did probably when it came from the factory, what I'm really doing is taking away a lot of the dirt that's built up over the 65 years this saw has been around. Now, if you're worried a little bit about sanding through the paint, which you might do, you could substitute a 600 grit sandpaper for this 400. It won't cut quite as fast, and it might take a little longer, but you'll get the same result. So you can see here that I'm actually picking up some of the paint. So I don't want to sand too much further. This area up here is probably about done now. I want to wipe off what we've got to get a better idea of where we are here. You can go back and pick up trouble spots later. Now, just look at that difference there. That's amazing. Now, it still looks like it could be done sanded a little more up this way. So let's go ahead and do that. going to add a little more water with that soap in it, and then just sand this area a bit more. Sometime when that paint's down into the orange peel of the finish, which there is a little bit here, you got to sand that orange peel down to get to the dirt that's in the little valleys created by that orange peel. And that should be about good enough. I think we're there. Now we'll move down here and do this section. And this side will be done. You can tell by the color that it's some paint, but it's also a lot of dirt. Let's see where we are. You can still see there's some areas here that could be cleaned up, but other than that, I think we're about there. Now, I've already started working on this front rail. You remember, it's the rail that the fence attaches to. It's very discolored in many ways. It's still smooth, but I wanted to clean it up and shine it up a little bit. You can see right here, I've already gone to work on this part. So now let me show you how I've done it. It's really very simple. All I'm using is 120 grit dry sanding paper this time. This is just regular old sanding. I'm not pressing very hard at all. And actually, I'm creating a grain direction with the sandpaper, so I want to go with the length. I don't want to go this way. I think it would look strange. But you can see with very little effort, it cleans up very quickly. Just taking that old tarnish and oxidation off. Okay, now it's time to work on the cast iron tops. Here I have both wings. You can see on this side, I've already cleaned it up. And I'll show you how I did that in a minute. On this side is what this one looked like before we got started. This one even has some more stuff on it. It looks like something's been spilled on here. So I'm going to use this rather crude scraper just to go over it and pop off some of that stuff. There's no sense trying to sand it off. So now I'm going to go back with this 120 grit sandpaper and just start sanding the whole surface. And when I'm done with that, we're going to use a finer grit sandpaper to clean it up. I'm using this stiff sponge block to back up the sandpaper because I want a flat surface when I'm sanding the cast iron top. You'll notice once again I'm going with the direction because this too will leave sanding marks and actually a grain to the metal. So now that I'm finished with the 120 grit sandpaper, I want to get this dust and rust that was on here kind of mopped off. So before I start with the next grit, I'm just going to add a little bit of mineral spirits to the rag and wipe it down. And that'll help pick up those rust particles that are in there. I'm also going to use the mineral spirits when I sand very briefly over this surface with 320 grit wet dry sandpaper. So we're just going to add a little on here. And sand it one more time. Now this will take some of the sanding scratches out from the previous 120 grit. And by using your hand this time and a finer grit, you can see you'll pick up some more dirt that's down inside there. I suspect that mineral spirits is acting as a little bit of a solvent to loosen up some of that dirt too. You wouldn't want to use water on your cast iron top, of course, as I was using it on the paint when I was sanding that cabinet. You can see these wings have been pretty beat up over the years, but when we checked them out in that first episode, they were dead flat. Well, let's see what we have here. See the ends? I think it needs a little more work here, and there's some spots here. I'll see if I can get those out. Yep, there they come. Okay, now down here you want to sand right up to the edge using the flat of your hand and your fingers. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's better. And we'll do the same down here. I think I need a little bit more mineral spirits. Again, that mineral spirits is acting as a lubricant when sanding so that this 320 grit doesn't get clogged up and keeps sanding. That's the beauty of wet dry sandpaper. I think that's going to do it. So there's one last chore to do, and I want to take care of that before I put the base back on. I want to put a hole in the back of the machine so I can accommodate a dust collection port. So on the back, near the bottom, I've already drawn an outline of the shape of the hole I want to make. So just like in cutting out the hole in a piece of wood, we want to first drill holes so we can get a jigsaw blade in here. When you drill a hole in metal, the first thing you have to do is dimple it so that your drill bit doesn't drift around. These dots represent the holes that I'll have to make to attach the dust collection port to the cabinet. So I'm going to drill a hole there as well. So when you're drilling metal, a few things to remember. We've already dimpled those spots. We first want to drill a small hole as a pilot hole before we drill a larger hole. And we want to add a little lubricating oil where we're going to drill as well. So I've stepped my way up from the smaller hole, and now I'm ready to drill the finished hole size. Now I've changed bits so I can enlarge the holes where I will attach the dust port to the cabinet. And this will allow me to use a sheet metal screw that'll self-tap right into the cabinet steel. So now to make the cutout, I'm going to use my jigsaw with a metal cutting blade that has a medium tooth. A fine tooth would be used for either finer cuts or thinner metal, and a larger tooth would be for heavier metal, rougher cuts. And don't forget, safety glasses are a must, so make sure you're wearing them. So I just want to knock off the sharp edges from the cutout with this file. One last screw to go on this dust port, and then we'll be all done. See you next time. We're going to put it all back together and start tuning up this saw for use.